What's happening, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Austin, and welcome to a very special edition of this week's Roundup. We're going to be talking with Tom about the much-awaited roadmap that was just released yesterday, in fact. So, Tom, how you doing, man? Good to see you.
I'm good. Good to see you.
All right. So we had mentioned on the last Roundup that there were some delays with the roadmap. Can you, before we dive into the nitty gritty, can you just kind of touch on what were the items that delayed the roadmap slightly that we wanted to kind of hash out before we released it?
Yeah. So in the last DevvE update that you and I did, we weren't quite ready to put the roadmap out, but I wanted to explain, to people that there was a delay and some of the reasoning behind the delay, but I couldn't go into the specifics of it. So now the roadmap's out, so now I can, right? So I kind of alluded to two main concepts. So what those two concepts are, and again, now I can go into them in more detail, is number one, the public shard. And it'll be the very first time that people can come in, see the API, start using it, put the HTTP post commands out to our servers, get the responses, mint a new coin, transfer it to someone else, then build applications that use those functionalities to manage and transfer and create, both fungible and non-fungible tokens. So people being able to do that, there's a lot that people will be able to do to create, those types of applications on DevvX. And so, So the reason I wanted to delay the roadmap for that is because it's important, right? It's a pretty big milestone for what we're doing. And I think what it'll mean is that many other entities can come in and start building. And I think that'll build and grow ecosystem. And so in order to really kind of come out with it, though, we wanted to get our arms around it, make sure that we had the pieces in place, to be able to support it. Make sure that we put the prioritization kind of on staff, to be able to support it. One of the things that's really exciting that we'll put more information out about in general is Bill Anderson, our CTO, is going to kind of personally be leading the charge and driving all of that. And so we have one of our most senior people really taking a step and making that his main thing. And so that was part of the reason for the delay on the roadmap, is just getting our arms around the public shard and the S2 business. So the public shard is part of the S2 business. The S2 business is basically the business where other people build their applications on DevvX. So Bill is going to be leading the S2 business, and he's going to be leading the technical effort to put out the public shard and the test net, and then eventually people can transition to productizing, right? So we'll be putting more information about what Bill's doing there, and a lot more detail will be coming out, but the main kind of categories on the roadmap. The second other big category that kind of led to the delay was, I guess I would say, the definition, or kind of, the specifics of what we're coming out with the version 1 platform release. And so one of the things in particular that we've had a lot of progress on is the lending platform. And I'm excited to show a lot more of that, and so in the near future, we're going to have more demonstrations and show and tell of what is in that platform. It's pretty far along. You can see the full user interface, how it all works. It's a lot like Aave, but checks all the boxes for TradFi. And that's a product that has enormous potential, that other big partners can come in and work with us on, that we accelerated, right? And so a lot of what one does when you're kind of in these shoes, and you're kind of figuring out what you're doing as a tech company, early stage, and you're trying to find the optimal kind of path to get products out and get people excited and show utility for DevvE and things like that. There were a few application products that we felt we could get out earlier that also were showing traction and interest in the market, that also kind of pushed that we'd want to get it out earlier. And some of that analysis we had to get our arms around again and figure out exactly what we're doing before we put the roadmap out. And so it kind of shows up just as an item, at the end of the roadmap, the platform. But one of the more important things in the roadmap that people might not have picked up on is we added the lending platform into it. And that is something that, is a specific product that's coming out earlier than we were originally planning, that I think times well with kind of the cycles in the crypto space, that drives DevvE utility and interactions more quickly. So things that are really kind of bullish overall for what we're doing, that again, got our arms around and wanted to make sure we fully kind of had fleshed it out before we put out, this is what we're doing. So.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, I figured what we could do today, I'll pull up the roadmap. Maybe we can go one by one. I got to be honest, Tom, the public shard is something that just excites me so much. I hope we can spend, a few minutes kind of diving into a little bit about that, because I think that, man, that carries so much potential for us.
Yeah.
All right, so let's kick through this here real quick. So the very first one, and this is in Q3 2025, Ecosystem Project Foundation and Testing Infrastructure, which says core development standards and test frameworks established for ecosystem reliability. Now, I did all right in school, but I'm a little smooth-brained. What does that mean?
Yeah. So in general, when you're really getting to production releases of software that has kind of financial, mechanisms, you have to put in both the processes for how you're doing the development, and you have to put in the processes for testing and verification. So a lot of what we've done over the past year even has been putting a lot more testing into the system and automation. And so if you make some changes, you can get what are called regression errors, where something that was working in the past now isn't working. So we already kind of fixed it and got it working, but you make a new change in it, and it now something that was working in the past isn't working. And those kinds of problems, haunt, software developers, right? And so what you end up doing to prevent those kinds of things is, as things are, created and finished, you put up automated tests that make sure it's all working the way it should be working. And then it's a lot of extra work, but when you put in that extra work, then when you make changes, then all those tests run, and you have an automated way to make sure stuff, is still running the way that you wanted it to run. And it just makes it where your development on an ongoing basis is, a lot faster. And so, and then when you talk about CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development pipelines, just the ways that we're implementing the software. So all of this is just kind of the infrastructure in our development process. And if you're going to production level releases on financial software, you have to be professional about how you're implementing those things. For sure.
Okay. So that made sense. Now, as far as the public shard launch is concerned, so this is, it's number 2 on here. Developers gain access to the DevvX API and testnet to start building on chain. And so as the guy who's been, kind of talking a lot about DevvE, one thing that I've always desired, and I know that a lot of other people have, are how can I touch and feel it? How can I play with the fraud, theft, and loss? How can I see how the privacy works in the real world? And so what are you envisioning that the public shard will actually be? Is it going to be like an Arbitrum where builders can come in and launch DeFi type products, or is it going to be more curated? What are your thoughts around that?
So in general, the DevvX architecture is so powerful because we parallelize all of the ways that we implement any given set of immutable data, right? So a blockchain is immutable data. Each block adds transactions that show ownership, but also show just data on the blockchain. So if you're, for example, running an ESG application and you have auditable data that shows the provenance of how ESG assets are created, there's a specific blockchain that maintains all that data for that application. And then you have another application that's a video game, right? And you could have a specific blockchain that maintains all the data for the video game. And then you have another application that manages a $100 million lending platform that a partner like DevvX puts the assets in, right? And so you have a specific blockchain that manages that data. So other blockchains have all of their data on one blockchain. And it's not an efficient system, and that leads to a lot of the cost and just challenges in scale and largely challenges in security. But also it doesn't let you optimize for a particular application, right? If you do a defense industry application, that has a different level of security requirements than a video game again, right? That kind of thing. And so I'm a little bit just generally talking about the architecture of DevvX and where it's different, right? So one of the best things that we found over time, one of the big competitive advantages that DevvX has over really everything else out there, is the architectural flexibility that we have, and we implement that through what we call shards, right? So in shards, a lot of times means different. Like shards generally refers to parallelization of implementing the processing on a blockchain, but for other blockchain, sharding usually means something else. It again means one massive blockchain in your for other blockchains, you're implementing a system where you have many validators that anybody can come in and run the system, and you want to parallelize how and optimize and speed up how you kind of add to that one monolithic blockchain. In our case, our sharding approach almost shouldn't be called sharding just because, again, it kind of gets confused with what the sharding means with other blockchains. But in our case, sharding is still parallelization, which is why it's called blockchain, but it's really just separating applications into using their own blockchains. And then we have a nifty mechanism where we can have cross-shard transactions where transactions from one blockchain or one shard can transfer over to another blockchain or another shard. Okay, so with that said, that also drives how we run our S2 business. So when we're talking about the public shard launch, we're talking about the business in which other people can build their applications on DevvX. So that's S2. That's what we call S2. So our S2 business is the business that Bill's going to be running, and if somebody wants to build their own application, what's going to be exciting is for the first time, you can come on and you can do whatever you want on the testnet, right? And so you can come in and just make sure it works. And I've had people messaging me today, after we came up with, the roadmap release, saying, "Hey, can I build this or can I build that?" Right? And so we're going to put them into a process that Bill's going to put together and say, "This is what needs to happen in order for you to actually launch a production, application on it." And by the time, we'll walk before we run. We're starting with the test net. We're getting our own ducks in order. But by the time it's really kind of flowing and more people are building applications, be very quick. Like you'll be able to just build an application and test it on the test net and deploy it very easily, on a public network. Okay, so in general, that's a big part of what we're doing then is making it where people can customize to their own needs and can get on. I envision there's going to be shards that a lot of different applications with similar needs can run on a shard and be more cost effective and kind of get things going. There's going to be applications that have very high security requirements or very high kind of control requirements. They don't want throughput to be diminished by somebody else's application, so they get their own shard, right? So we have all of that architectural flexibility. And you also asked then, can people come in? Is it going to be curated? That kind of thing. So we want to find that right balance. So what the DevvX blockchain is going to be that's different, I think, from other blockchains is not a complete free-for-all. Like we're headed where the world is headed, and we have been for the past 8 years, and the world kind of finally caught up to our philosophies given all of the movement from TradFi into DeFi. And there's just more and more news every day coming out about how these big traditional financial institutions are getting into the blockchain space. So part of the game that we're all moving into, all of us in the crypto space, is that you can't have this Wild West. You can't have these things where people come in and do rug pulls. You can't have situations where you leave yourself open to these massive thefts. Like $1.5 billion is stolen right now. Everybody goes, "Yeah, it happens," right? But in the TradFi world, that never is going to fly, right? Like, soon as something even a fraction of that happens, everyone's going to be freaking out and going like, "Oh my God, this is so dangerous. We need, this is part of what I hope happens with us. We need fraud protections and theft protections, and that hopefully that further drives, our applications." So if somebody wants to come in and just build an application that is going to be a rug pull, like we're going to put in mechanisms that, and kind of requirements and some upfront, effort that's going to really minimize that type of thing. So we want to find the right balance. We want to be the platform that is trusted. We want to be the platform where your assets are trusted. You're not worried about theft. You're not worried about your private key getting lost. You're not worried about the platform going under, in which case you have 3 years of bankruptcy challenges to get your assets back. All of those things we're designing that those problems are eliminated. But then hand in hand with that of being this this platform where for the first time you're kind of running things in a way that you have a much higher level of trust. Similarly, you don't want projects coming out that are doing rug pulls, and so it's not going to be just completely open, because what that means, if it's completely open, is that you can have these projects that do rug pulls. But it also is not something that I also want to emphasize. It's not the old TradFi mentality where you have to. It's going to be more like AWS, I think, right? Like AWS kind of found that right balance. You can come in and you can use AWS to build whatever business, but you can't use AWS to do things that are illegal, right? In their terms and conditions and even in kind of their enforcement, right? So the balance I think we need to find, that's actually a good kind of summary. It's the same level of balance that you have with these cloud providers. So.
I found that so interesting as you were talking about that. It's like 2009. It's we need decentralization. We need to get away from the banks. And you get to 2015, and it's like, you ever see that video of the sheep that's stuck in the ditch and he gets rescued and then he leaps away?
Oh, and he jumps
into the ditch again.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So what I love about this is, instead of jumping back into the ditch of government save us, we have these protections on, but they are done in a trustless way.
Yeah.
On chain and verifiably on chain, and so that's the beauty of it.
Not your keys, not your crypto, right? All of the what in general we're trying to do as a platform is take all of the best things of DeFi, but then combine it with the trust and safety security of TradFi, right? And banks are pretty, there's aspects of banking and the TradFi industry in general that is not palatable to a lot of the crypto space, and for good reasons, right? And the level of control and the things that, you kind of feel like you have a thumb pushed down on you, like, your assets can be taken out, by somebody else's whim, like those kinds of things just are, not good in a longer term financial setting where people have more control. So I think, the traditional finance industry has room to be fixed as well. And that's part of what we're doing, is taking the innovation of the DeFi space, not your keys, not your crypto, control of things. But, when we're paying our rent or our mortgage and we're buying food for our family and paying your car and stuff, your money's in a bank account, and you don't worry to the level we do in the crypto space that your assets are all going to suddenly disappear too. So there's room for the crypto space to move to kind of, TradFi mentalities as well. So we really are trying to find kind of that best of both worlds future of what finance really hopefully will become, for humanity.
Beautiful. Well, for the sake of our video, because we might want to do a separate video just talking about some of this stuff, but for the sake of getting through the roadmap, I'm going to move us on. But
there's a lot more out there. So
and Tom and I are going to be doing a live Q&A with the community probably a week after next. And so if you have any questions at the end of this, put them into the Google form that the moderators can hook you up with in the Telegram channel. All right, so the next one is a DevvE Whitepaper update. And admittedly, that definitely needs an update because a lot of things have changed. What specifically, just maybe bullet pointing? I mean, obviously, the exchange only kind of had a bullet point in the first one, whereas it's really taken on a much bigger role.
Yeah, and even beyond the exchange, some of the liquidity cache concepts that drive utility in the DevvE token. So I think there's kind of two main categories that, there's a number of things that need to be updated, but two main categories I would say that come to mind when you look at what the white paper needs to be changed. One is we had more of the ESG focus, and that's still some of our long-term focus, right? We still have the idea of the Forever Foundation and creating, this evergreen fund that we can fund things that improve the world. And that's part of what Ray and I want to do. Like we're both at a point in our careers where we could do whatever we want, and doing something that really kind of, uses resource to improve people's lives is a big part of what I want to do. But you need to matter first, and you need to build, kind of financially scalable and growable applications, right? So some of the long-term vision of what we're wanting to do in environmental applications and social applications, letting people control their own value, removing middlemen, like a lot of that is, all of that is still, the longer-term goals. But, the ESG space got politicized, and in addition, we actually had a lot of opportunity-driven changes. Again, for the past 8 years, we've had focused blinders on. We're doing enterprise blockchain, traditional finance types applications. All the original design I did like almost 10 years ago now was a lot of the original thinking was around Forex, right? Which is the biggest level of kind of monetary transfers. So we designed a blockchain ultimately for that would have the scale and cost effectiveness and control and privacy and, just all the features that you need in traditional finance. So the world kind of finally caught up to us. And all of a sudden we're finding that like the things that traditional finance really needs, we've solved and we've uniquely solved. And I think that's going to accelerate, again, like you see like the Circle IPO, stablecoin legislation. You also see all of these treasuries that, public companies are making. Then you see all the real world assets. What that ultimately is going to turn into is all traditional finance companies are going to be maintaining crypto assets. There's no doubt. Every single traditional finance company in the world is going to have to maintain crypto assets because at a minimum, you're going to have stable coins to pay vendors, right? That kind of thing. That's where the world is headed. And what that means, though, is you have all of this world that doesn't just shrug and go $1.5 billion, hacks happen. Like they're not going to go, it happens, like they're not going to accept that. So then you have, well, how do you manage this, right? Like, if you kind of constantly have this push and pull, here's your private key management, but then here's, the risk of theft. If you only have one point of failure, only one person has the private key written down and then they, pass away or die or whatever, and you can't access it or it gets destroyed in a fire or whatever, you lost all your assets. But if you have multiple ways to then use the assets, which you have to have in kind of a real business sense, then you have multiple attack vectors, for theft. And so all these TradFi companies are going to have, these problems, that we've uniquely solved. And we create solutions that are a level beyond just private key management itself that TradFi needs. I think all of that's going to accelerate, right? So getting back to how the white paper is changing, we shifted from the ESG kind of focus back to kind of our roots and our core and the original patents we put 10 years ago that were around traditional finance. And it really is opportunity driven. And then the second category that I think we need to change in the white paper is just the utility of DevvE and really kind of show that, because that's really expanded a lot. And even in this roadmap that we put out, the idea that API calls for people that are building on within the DevvX S2 business will use DevvE, to kind of power the transactions. Like we're going to be putting that in. That's even more utility. And then we've got all the device stuff where you can, contribute to to liquidity caches and earn off of market making or lending or payments or exchange, right? Those kinds of things. So all of the utility around DevvE, and it's really become very powerful ecosystem, very powerful concepts that needs to be reflected in the white paper as well. So.
Wonderful. And something surprising that I saw, so I don't know, I think it was one of the mods had dropped a poll into the Telegram channel saying, what of these roadmap items are you the most excited about? 25 to 30%, I forget the exact number, said they were most excited about the next one, which is the updated websites for DevvE and DevExchange, which, we're working with the guys over at them, 3M, I don't even know how you say their name, but it's Sean and his team, Sean. And they're incredible. Like that was, when we signed on with them, that was something that I was extremely excited about. And so I assume, the new websites that are coming out are not just going to be beautiful, but they're really going to reflect, kind of the core values of what we're building moving forward. And I think we should have something to show the community here at some point relatively soon. Yeah. I don't know when exactly, but
so I saw kind of a teaser that Sean put together, and Sean's amazing. And I love his passion for what we're doing as well, because he's a big DevvE holder. And so he's like, we got to do this. We got to do it right. I want to make sure that we have the creative flexibility to do things how we want to do it, and I was like, you know what, you're awesome. Let's do it. Let's just do it. How you think we ought to do it, right? So there's always constraints, right? And there was one thing Sean wanted to do, and Ray kind of chimed in like, I don't think we're going to do that, And so there's constraints, right? And we also, he has his other project, the Pineapple, project that's a little more aggressive and taking kind of the pineapple memes You know, what pineapples mean to some people, and kind of leaning into that a little bit, right? But you know, at the end of the day, a big part of what we're doing again is bridging TradFi and DeFi. So we have to be a little more conservative than some things, but it's still, you know, especially the DevvE site, it's a crypto site, right? And you want it to look slick and get people excited. And so I've seen that teaser. I love it. So I think people are going to be really excited at it. And we wanted to get the roadmap out before we started putting those teasers out. So there's just broadly, not just the website, but broadly, there's a number of things queued up that we needed to get the roadmap out, but we could start putting out, you know, some more information. And the website teaser and ultimately the website release, you know, is going to be really compelling stuff.
Indeed. Okay, so next on the list, institutional partner integration strategy and architecture design. And it says system architecture finalized with key institutional partners. So that is, you know, fairly ambiguous just to somebody like myself reading it. What does that mean?
Yeah, so there was a bit of the wording in that was very specific to the partner. And as we were doing the roadmap, I'm like, you can't put that little phrase in there because, you know, so we're still in this domain where we've, you know, signed an agreement with a large TradFi partner. We're integrating their technology with the blockchain. It's globally deployed technology, and it's the first time that the technology is being integrated at this level with a blockchain where, you know, transactions are guaranteed to. So again, I can't go into too much detail on it. So it's purposefully vague, but in order to integrate with their platform, we had to design a specific architecture, right? So we're a little bit in this kind of weird land where we signed the agreement. We want to let everybody know, but they said you have to hit some milestones, largely regulatory milestones that really are kind of indicating, you know, how and when the exchange is coming out before we can kind of do a joint announcement. But there's a lot of work going on in the meantime, you know, integrating technologically their platform and ours. So we wanted to indicate that to people. So we've been putting together an overall architecture that bridges between their technology and ours. So that's what that's referring to.
Well, you're going to get people very excited for that little snippet. So the next two kind of lean into that. So we've got the licensing, which is just the regulatory approvals, which are obviously important. But I think to the community, they're very important because of the next one, because they know that the institutional exchange partner won't announce with us until we have that in place. And so that by far in the poll was the most exciting thing to people. Now, I thought, and granted, I get the crypto mentality. I thought the public shard might be, you know, something that would really stand out in there. And I think it probably hit 25.
I don't think people have honed in on that as much as they might, you know, coming up.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've got those two. Now, DevvE integration with DevvX S2. You just talked a little bit about this a second ago, but can we go into just a little bit more detail on what that means?
Yeah, I wanted this bullet point in the roadmap in particular just to make the point that S2 is an exciting business, but it also is going to create extra utility for DevvE. So one of the things I envision doing is, you know, figuring out the OUs Bill says, right? So the operational units that link in with how on the back end a shard ties in with the system or whatever, and how various projects or companies that want to either spin up their own shard or tie into another shard, how they interact and how they get their own keys that let them, you know, talk to the system, what types of requirements and controls they need. Like if you have, for example, a project that's issuing a real world asset, you know, representation of a precious metal, they're going to, again, we want our platform to be very trustworthy. So they're going to need to sign an agreement with us that says they're going to manage that properly, where the assets that they're claiming that they have, you know, in hand are one-to-one and audited and one-to-one with the actual tokenized representation on chain, right? So that when people come to DevvX, they know they can trust that, you know, here's the contracts, here's the agreements, here's the audits, all that's we're gonna put on chain as NFTs as well. They can review all of that, and so you end up with just a trustworthy platform with lots of real world assets, stable coins, all the functionality around the lending, exchange, all that, right? But as more and more people then. So again, that's some of the design of the S2 business. And as we're kind of figuring out the interactions and how, you know, how companies technically integrate that, I'm envisioning the API calls just tie in directly with DevvE as well. So each API call that's called just has a little tick on DevvE, and it's a good mechanism to be able to just manage throughput and use. Especially like one of the things in the traditional finance world is you have an agreement, SLA or whatever, and you have uptime requirements, and like it's all kind of very traditional, and then you pay this amount, and it increases in tiers. Like the traditional world works in kind of a different way with SaaS platforms, but when you want people to be able to grow in the DeFi way, grow more organically, grow with kind of innovation, and not have to have expenses that maybe don't match how you're testing things innovatively and how many different companies are kind of coming at it. Being able to tie it in, kind of per API call actually is a pretty powerful way to implement DeFi mentalities, for growth. And so that's what that bullet point is how DevvE is going to be used to kind of accelerate and further grow the S2 business, and then similarly how the S2 business is going to further grow and accelerate DevvE's use and utility. So
beautiful. And just to dive a little bit deeper on that, so as the community would be used to paying, what we would call gas, and that's going to be on the user side of things. And obviously the dApps that are deployed on other networks have to pay their own gas fees to deploy and things like that. But where that's absorbed on the user end on other networks, it's really, those API calls are absorbed on the application end on DevvX. Am I right?
Right. Yeah. But, like most things in like most businesses, your expenses flow down, to the customers, right? So if you sell something online, there's a shipping expense, you just include the shipping expense, what the customer pays. So I think it'll give, so this concept is like gas, right? It's not exactly gas, right? Because it's not literally being used by validators to process transactions as part of the consensus mechanism. But it's similar in effect to what gas does and driving utility in DevvE. And the utility here, again, to me is more the innovation and the style that goes along with DeFi. So that is kind of an offshoot of the original implementation of Ethereum, which was the first, kind of big Turing complete, on-chain, smart contract system, ended up with kind of these gas concepts. And they were building, the philosophy of it was to build a decentralized platform that anybody can come in and build an application. But part of what ended up happening is it drove a lot of utility and value for Ethereum itself as a token. Almost probably as a side effect. Like I'm sure they were thinking about it, but the level and extent, probably kind of grew from the original design as opposed to the vice versa. And so and part of what's happened again is then you end up having applications that you can run and drive in this more DeFi type of mentality. So mirroring that really is a great way to build DeFi applications. And then it's a great, kind of new utility for DevvE as well.
Very exciting. All right. So I know this next one is near and dear, and it's really important. So lending and borrowing live on DevvX, first live use of DevvE across lending and liquidity provisioning. So you mentioned this earlier. It's got a similar, kind of look and feel to Aave, but it checks all the TradFi boxes. And so there's been kind of an expansion in the way in which Dev Exchange is going to be rolled out. Am I right in saying that, Tom?
Yeah. I think before we had a roadmap that was, I've described it this way, a monolithic type of release where you put a lot of effort, you hire a lot of FTEs over a time period, and you come out with one minimum viable product. And if you look at some of the pieces that go into that, some of those pieces make sense as their own standalone products that have partners right now that are interested in them, and have their own potential for announcements and relationships and things like that. So we kind of broke up the monolithic release and said we could come out with this piece and this piece and this piece, kind of in an order, and they could have their own businesses around it. And so it kind of fits a little bit better, the cyclical nature of the crypto space and kind of where we are in that. And it also fits just risk management, and it fits, being able to roll with the punches and be nimble and kind of grow things that are opportunity driven. And there's so much changing in the crypto space right now with how much TradFi is moving into the crypto space and all the announcements there. If you go back 8 or 9 years, there was the invention of the private key loss protections and the theft protections and the fraud protections, right? Each of those is its own separate kind of logic problem. And we came up with clever logic solutions, to each of those things. So if you go back, it was one of a number of things, we were working on inventing. But now you start to see, like, again, the Circle IPO, all the stablecoin legislation, all the stablecoin efforts, all of the real world asset tokenization, all of the treasuries, all of those things need fraud and loss protection. So when you look at all of these things suddenly popping up that are just red hot with many, many billions or tens or hundreds, even probably getting to the trillions of dollars, getting behind it. All of those need those two simple concepts that we uniquely have, right? And so my point is by taking the monolithic approach, breaking it out, and you have some of these other pieces coming out sooner, you can find yourself in a situation where some of the things you're developing suddenly become very relevant to big movements in the space, and you want to be able to take advantage of that. So overall was a good kind of planning change and structural change in how we were moving ahead. And then in particular, the lending platform itself. I'd almost recommend, because that's worth its own whole DevvE DevvE, Tom and Austin, update itself. And I'd like to, go through a demonstration of it, show people how it works and everything. So, but for the purposes of the roadmap discussion, the lending platform, we've made a lot of progress on it. We've been kind of silent, learning our lessons in the past, and not teasing it too much along the way. So I think it's going to be a lot that comes out all of a sudden from people's point of view compared to what we've done in the past as well. So.
Well, I think Resurrecting Tech Talks with Tom would be an excellent demonstration of that. I'm particularly excited because I think a big part of the reason why the crypto space has not become aware of DevvE and DevvX so much up until this point is they haven't actually seen it in action. Because when I pitch this to somebody and I say, this is what's coming, they go, my mind is blown. But how do they touch and feel it, right? And these are the real touch and feel that are coming. And there's a lot of things actually in this that are extremely compelling. So, and then to round us out here, platform V1 launch. So obviously, we see V1 in there, and it says that it's for maintaining and transferring digital assets, lending functionality, and exchange functionality. So could you give us a little bit more on what that V1 will actually be? Yeah.
So that's the subset of the overall big monolithic approach that we thought we could come out more quickly, drive DevvE value, and get products out quicker. And so that's kind of the end result. So that's kind of the punchline of the whole roadmap. And it's a little bit vague, but one thing that's important in there is we added the lending functionality. That's a material concept, right? So when you're kind of going through this with a magnifying glass and you're looking, it's like those two words are pretty important in this overall roadmap. And again, that's one of the big things that led to the delay, is what products can we come out with more quickly. And then the exchange functionality is still in this V1 launch, of course. And some of the ways that we're implementing it, I'm excited about how we're planning on coming out with it, largely because it emphasizes earlier the DevvE usage in the exchange. And so all of the exchange always used DevvE. It always was used. It always is going to be used for even the bigger monolithic, larger scale release that we'll come out with over time. But the first kind of bit of exchange that we're coming out will have supported tokens, all the business development around it, the CAS-FAS licensing, all those things. But it also was forward pushing forward some of the bits of Exchange technology and implementations that in particular use DevvE for implementing those transactions and the conversions and using contingent transaction sets and the mathematically instantaneous settlement. So I'm excited about the pieces that really are now comprising this V1 launch. There's less risk around it. There's more DevvE utility. There's more flexibility and nimbleness. So it's just a good overall approach, and I'm excited where we landed on what we're planning.
Amazing. And that was, man, what a good talk we've just had. Man, my brain stopped there for a second. Now, there's some things on the right-hand side, and I think what I'd like to do is read through them, but without comment, because it'll give the Q&A that we're going to do live. I know folks are going to have questions about these. And so if that's all right with you, I'm just going to speed through them real quick for the sake of this roundup, and then maybe we can dive in a little deeper on the live. So onboard bailment partners, INN service enhancements, don't know what that means, wallet, identity, and user onboarding systems, support systems, and user documentation. That's obvious. Asset management and token infrastructure, production infrastructure, security framework. Now, this is one that I know people are going to want to know about. Reward multipliers, token drops, and liquidity caches. So we'll keep that for our Q&A. And the marketing platform launch. There's just so much in there. Hopefully you guys, got a little bit more insight hearing Tom explain, the vision behind this, but there's really, really good things coming. And so, I don't want to speak on your behalf, Tom, but I know that you appreciate the community as much as I do. And that we've got, bright days ahead, my friend.
Yeah, love our community. So I'm excited for people to see all the details on these kind of bigger points that are coming out. So
yes, indeed. All right, my friends, my name's Austin. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you guys on the next video. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.